Hey friends, Jeff here again with another episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today we welcome Dr. James Mackay. James is the founder and CEO of Aristea Therapeutics, based out of San Diego, California, where they are at the forefront of innovating therapeutic options for inflammatory disease. James has decades of experience in a variety of leadership roles, both in large pharma and as well in small to medium-sized organizations, now leading Aristea. Over the time I've gotten to know James, who he is to me is integrity. Whether that be standing up and saying he got something wrong, or whether holding the ground and doing the right thing, even when it's hard, James and his integrity shows up in everything that he does. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Dr. James Mackay. Dr. James Mackay, it is such an honor to have you, and I've been excited for this conversation since we had a chance to speak a few weeks ago. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. Very much looking forward to it as well.
Yeah. I just did a really brief introduction of who you are to me in the short time we've gotten to know each other. Would love for you to tell us a little bit about what you're up to in the world these days.
Yeah, sure. So, we're rapidly getting into the fall now. Seems like summer went flying past. Been busy all the way through summer, but had the opportunity to head back to the UK for some vacation in July. Was the first time that we'd seen our two kids for nearly 3 years because of COVID. They're grown up in their 30s, but they're still your kids. So that was a really, really nice visit. And then, back to San Diego, and Aristea Therapeutics is busy with execution of multiple clinical trials. So seems like the weeks and the months have gone flying past since the summer.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we're here at the doorstep of Q4 2022.
Indeed.
So on the podcast, we like to get a rich picture of those that join us as our guests. And one of the ways we do that is the three H's. And the three H's are a hero or heroes, a hardship, and a highlight. What are your three H's?
Yeah, so start with the hero. And I gave a lot of thought to this. It was actually a really, really difficult question to answer. But the one that I landed on, which maybe many of the listeners will never have heard of, actually, is a soccer player who played for Manchester United, which is my soccer team. And his name is Eric Cantona. He's a Frenchman originally. And he was a truly inspirational leader in the club. And, as well as playing on the field and the impact that he had on the field, was tremendous impact in terms of leadership on the young players behind the scenes, and actually was pivotal in really bringing forward a group of youth players that resulted in that team winning more than any other team has ever done in a period of time. And just a really interesting guy and really, really impressive leader that continues to impress me to today, even though he no longer plays soccer. He still has a major influence.
How old were you when I assume you're a lifelong fan of United?
Yeah. I am.
How old were you when you had this noticing of Eric?
I would have been in my 30s or early 40s at the time, and lived in Manchester at the time, so I had the opportunity to actually, see him in person. And one of the things that used to really, really impress me is he was the one that kind of controlled the game from the middle of the field. And sometimes that means that you kind of fade into the background as the other players are doing their things and kind of control where the ball goes. And he was very, very impressive in doing that. So always taught me that a leader doesn't have to be, standing up on the table, cheering and shouting all the time. They can actually be quietly managing the playing field and letting, the other people on that playing field do what they do best. And he was an expert in doing that.
Yeah, and I have lots of questions about that because I think that leads to your philosophy and approach to leadership, but I'll hold those for now.
Yeah, sure.
What about the other two H's?
Yeah, so hardship. Again, I thought a lot about this, and I kept coming back to, this is a strange one maybe, but drug development. It's really hard. And I've been doing it most of my career. And I think a lot of people don't understand how difficult drug development is and how many sometimes insurmountable obstacles appear in our way. And, the fact that, I've had the opportunity to work with teams, over the last 3 decades that have overcome many of those obstacles has been particularly fulfilling. But sometimes, you get up in the morning and think, I don't know how we're going to deal with this. It's tough. So that's maybe a little bit of an unusual hardship, but it's one that I've faced many, many times through my career in drug development.
And I don't know what your highlight will be here in a second, but I have to imagine you say that maybe with even some mixed feelings, because it's also given you your life, provided for you in probably extraordinary ways.
Yeah, Jeff, and that's why I said it's a little bit of an unusual answer. But yes, it absolutely has. I mean, it's given me my sort of whole career and life and focus during my life. So, and overcoming those hardships as you work your way through drug development, takes a lot of effort and a lot of good people to help you overcome them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's not just clearly black and white. That it's there's lots of elements to it, and hardship is one of them. And what about your highlight?
Yeah, that highlight for me has to be each drug that I've got approved. I've been involved in 6 drugs that have got approval during my career, and each one has been a truly, truly amazing experience. And to walk into the pharmacy and see the drug that you were responsible for developing sitting on the shelf is an amazing experience. So, and probably one of the best highlights for me was the gout drug Zurampic that I was responsible for leading the development of. And I was in CVS or Walgreens one day, and the gentleman in front of me was handing in his script, was handing in his first script for Zurampic, and he was a gout patient. And, I just listened to him talk to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist talked to him about the way that the medicine was going to work. And I still wanted to tap him on the shoulder and tell him, but I felt it was inappropriate to do it, and just to, because I shouldn't really have been listening to his conversation with the pharmacist. But it was a kind of sort of tingle down your spine moment to know that, that person was going to gain benefit from the work that we'd done.
I have to ask, and about that moment or moments like that, because many of our listeners are executives, CEOs, and leaders who have experienced similar things as you, but we also have lots of listeners who are listening in from different industries. And tell us, if you would just describe one of those moments, maybe it's with that one, what is it like in I'll call it the hallways of the office, when that moment comes and that approval, is it dancing in the hallways? Is it champagne corks popping? What is that moment like in in the halls, again, it may not be physical halls, but what is it like in those moments for when you experience those highlights of a drug being approved?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Probably the best way that I could describe it, it's like being a sports fan when your team wins the biggest competition. It's that moment when the final whistle goes and you've won. That's exactly what it feels like. And people have worked so hard, sometimes over 5-10 years or more, for this point. And sometimes very quickly after that, the adrenaline goes because people are exhausted because they've been working around the clock over the last few weeks to make it happen. And sometimes people want to go and party. When we got approval for Zorampic, the gout drug, we had a big water feature in front of the office, and the team decided they were going to go into the water feature fully clothed and dance in the water, and that was the celebration. But that was spontaneous.
Oh, I feel emotional. Like yeah. I've experienced my team winning the Super Bowl or the championship, and so I really appreciate that comparison. But I feel a little bit of emotion as you describe the feelings that people are experiencing in that moment. It's so cool. Thanks to you for giving us that little glimpse.
Yeah. And Jeff, I think the important thing for the listeners to understand is, that wasn't one season or 1 year to get to that. These people have been working on this for 10 years, maybe even 15 years, some of them, for that one moment.
Yeah.
So it's a really long commitment, and to finally get to that point in time. And remember, it's actually a very, very small percentage that actually ever get to that point in time. Through my career, I have worked with many incredibly talented scientists and drug developers who've never had the opportunity to experience that moment, but have done tremendous research and work through their careers. So it's a very tough business with a very low success rate at the end.
Yeah. And you really are pointing to something so powerful that while you're in the drug business, that's really not true. You're actually in the people business.
Correct.
And you've described decades of working with people who have been part of your journey, of those that have been working so hard. Where have you gotten to over these years in terms of how you view your role as leader, or maybe even as peer or colleague within those contexts? How do you see your place in that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a leader of teams for many decades now, and people often ask me, what's your style of leadership, and my answer always is that I care for the people that I work with, and it's about not only them, actually, it's about them and their families, their home life. They're all part of the extended team, because everything we do at work has an impact on that family and the extended team. So I've always felt through my career that, if you really care for people and take time to understand them, be open to talking to them about the challenges that they have at work, the challenges that they have at home, if they want to talk to you about it, then it can be tremendously helpful for them to have a leader who really understands everything that's going on in their lives and at work, and can respond appropriately. So if you know that somebody's having a tough time at home or a tough time with the kids or whatever, and suddenly they turn up at your desk and say, look, I'm sorry about this, but I really need to go. I've got to deal with a situation with the kids. You're instantly, yes, Go. Don't worry about it. We'll cover everything. And I think if you give the people that you work with that flexibility, they recognize it and they give you the flexibility back. And I always say to people that, the best leaders never have to ask anybody to do something because the individual knows what needs to be done anyway, and they're already doing it. And I think if you give people that flexibility, they give you that flexibility and understanding back, and they'll do whatever needs to be done because they know that you'll recognize that. And the next time that they need, flexibility, help, whatever it is, then you're going to be there for them to support them through that. And that, to me, that's the way I lead, and I think it's the best way to lead a team.
And I am sure over the decades, your feelings on that have evolved. That what you just described is not just one moment you woke up and, well, that's how I feel. If you were just to describe your journey as a leader, how have you evolved to the point where you're able to say with conviction and heart what you just described?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult question to answer because, I guess there are certain moments in time where you see, certain learning points and changes. But I think most of it is a gradual process as you work with a diverse group of people. You see people behave in particular ways. I think the things that have probably taught me the most actually is observing leaders behaving in a way that I subsequently decided is not the right way to lead. It's often tough when you're in that situation and you have a leader or a boss that's, behaving in a way that you don't like. And I always tell people when they're in that situation, turn that into a positive experience, because once you've been through that, you will never let one of your team members experience that, because you won't behave in that way. So I think learning how not to do things, strangely, molds you into the leader that you are. And it's just about layering experience upon experience on. It's very difficult to pinpoint certain things that happened in your career that made you the leader. I think it's much more of an osmosis of the experience and adjusting the way that you lead in order to become a better leader. And multiple times through my career, I had the opportunity, while I was at AstraZeneca, to have leadership coaching, those leadership coachings are very, very valuable because they kind of strip everything back and get to the core of what is you, and then explore how you turn up to other people and help you just adjust the knob a little bit in order to make you better at a particular thing or down tune a particular way of operating. And those are incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I've done that multiple times through my career as well. And, you continue to do it every day. Every day you learn from it. And I think the other thing from a leader that I learned early on is that leaders should always be prepared to stand up and tell their teams when they got it wrong. That's a very, very important characteristic of a good leader, because sometimes we get it wrong, or sometimes new information comes along that now means the decision that I made several weeks ago, actually we need to change that now because we've got new information on the table. And standing up as a leader and admitting to the team that things need to change and that I made the wrong decision, I think is actually very empowering for the team, because they realize that you as a leader also, will make missteps along the way, but you're prepared to recognize those and discuss those, and point the team in what you now believe is the right direction.
It was interesting because I was just about to ask, how do you create this environment that you've described, where people know what they need to do? They don't need to be told what to do. And then you just went to that. I'm sure there's lots of other elements, which I would love to hear you say more about, but this one element of your willingness to be vulnerable, your willingness to say, I'm sorry, I messed up, I made a mistake, I see things differently than I did a week ago. That feels like a critical element to creating an environment where people can say, I trust James, or whoever the leader is, that I trust them, that I can be real and vulnerable and take risks. That feels like a really critical part of you creating a safe space for them.
Yeah, I think it's all about, I guess, two things. It's about openness and trust. You need to create an environment where people can raise issues early. I'm actually a project manager by training. The worst thing that a project manager can ever experience is to learn of a problem and then there's no time to fix it.
Yeah.
If you're a project manager and you learn about the problem early enough, then you have an opportunity to fix it. So I always encourage my teams to make those issues visible as early as possible. And that's a difficult thing to do because as human beings, we don't like to be seen to be wrong. We don't like to be seen to fail. So you're actually asking somebody to, as you say, be kind of vulnerable and admit that something went wrong, whereas human nature is to try and fix it before it needs to become visible. But if you can support them in that and you can empower them to continue to try and solve the problem. So just because you've created an environment that allows them to make the problem visible doesn't mean that you need to disempower them in solving it. You can actually support them then in solving it, but they can still take the ownership of that problem. And I remember, when I was I was managing a group of project leaders at AstraZeneca, and they were the people that were responsible for leading the drug development projects across the whole portfolio. And one of them came to see me one day and she started to lay out a problem that she was experiencing. And I'm a bit of a problem solver by nature. So, and my wife would say this as well, that, I'm just telling you this. I don't need you to solve this problem for me. You just need to listen. And that's exactly what happened in this meeting. And this project leader, I started to throw ideas out to her about how to solve the problem. She stopped me and she said, James, she said, if you carry on doing this, she said, I will never come back and tell you about another problem again. She said, I don't want you to solve it. She said, I just need you to be aware of the fact that I'm dealing with this. She said, there may come a time when I need your help. But she said, I just want to share this so that I can discuss it through with you. And I want to remain responsible for solving this. And that was one of those pivotal moments in my leadership journey where, I realized that although I was trying to be helpful, I actually wasn't being helpful at all to her. And she had the courage. And I guess I'd created the environment that allowed her to stop her boss and say, no, you're not going to do this because this is not the way I want to interact with you. And, by creating that environment, he was able to do that, which actually then helped me as a leader to get better. And, she went away and solved the problem. And it's about creating a safe environment where people can share the fact that something's gone wrong and that they're trying to work on it. And it's not that easy to do. And you have to have the confidence to do the right thing. I think when we talked previously, one of the examples I gave you was when I first moved into the pharmaceutical business, and we had I don't know what it was, a quarterly review or something, and got ready with my team to prepare for it. Nobody else wanted to go and see the big boss for the quarterly review. And I said, well, okay, I'll go and see him by myself. And, the team had, we're having some budget problems. And I said to the team, well, I'm going to go and share this with them. And they're like, no, you can't do that. We can't be seen not to be on budget. And I'm like, well, we're not on budget. So, what do you expect me to do? And they were all like, you can't tell him, he'll go crazy. So anyway, I went to see him, and he was a bit of a formidable character and had a bit of a formidable persona. And I went into the room, sat down. I told him the truth, and I always remember he put both hands on his desk and he leaned back in his chair and he said to me, James, you are the first person this year that's actually told me the truth. Thank you. And he said, by the way, I don't like what you told me. And he said, you better go fix it. But he said, I really, really like the fact that you told me the truth. And that was, again, another probably pivotal moment for me, that you have to do the right thing. And if you don't make the problem visible, then you actually can't solve it. And he actually helped me to solve the problem. Whereas if he'd never known about it, well, he would have known about it at some point, but it would have been unsolvable by then. So, I mean, that example's from 30 years ago. So, still there vividly in my mind. I can still picture the exact moment when he did that. So clearly had an impact on him.
And as you're shaping the environment of your organization, you are clearly the champion of this way of showing up and this way of approaching work. How have you found it in terms of enrolling others? Because you're not in front of every single person on a day by day, week by week basis. How do you enroll other leaders to be able to hold the staff or the staff of this approach in how the organization is led?
I think you have to continually interact with those leaders, and you have to set the vision initially of what you're trying to achieve, and you have to set what I would say is, it's maybe going to sound strange, I'm going to say a vague plan to get to the vision. And the reason I say a vague plan is that plans always change. So you have to have a path that you're going to take, but accept that you're going to move off that path. If your path's too rigid, then you're not going to end up doing the right things, and you probably won't get to the end. But you start with that, but then you have to then stick with that and continually repeat that. And often they'll say, people sometimes don't believe things until they've heard it 6 times, 8 times, 10 times. And then they actually start to believe it then. And they also realize that you mean it. I mean, the worst thing a leader can do is stand up, present an overall mission or strategy for the organization, and then the first action that they take the next day is at odds with that vision. Then the whole thing disappears. So it's about you've got to be authentic as a leader. And if for some reason you do need to deviate from that strategy that you laid out, you need to explain why you're deviating from it. So it's again about, as we talked earlier, it's about the leader being prepared to stand up and say, I'm doing this and I realize this is not in line with what I said, but here's the reason that I'm doing it. It doesn't change the overall goal. I think the other thing that is important is that you have to surround yourself by people who challenge you, right? If you just have people who are going to say yes, yes, then you're not going to end up with the best outcome. So all through my career, I've hired people who frankly make me feel a little uncomfortable. And that's a good thing, because I know that then if they believe that I'm making a wrong decision, they're going to tell me that they think I'm making a wrong decision and will be prepared to, engage with me in that discussion. And I'm open to that. And I think the more that you respect other team members, learn from them, show that you can learn from them, and show that you respect their technical expertise, then you create an environment where the whole team will really excel in what they're trying to achieve. So it's about giving people the space to be the experts, because I'm leading a drug development team. Every single team member that I have is more experienced than me in their particular discipline. So I am the least experienced of any of the particular disciplines that we're in. So it's actually right that I should listen to those experts, because they actually know more than I do. And I'm the one that knits it all together, and creates the overall plan. But the individual components of that come from people who are much better at their particular subject matter expertise than I am. And you have to show them that and empower them that they are the expert in that field.
There's a phrase that's coming up for me about your approach to culture and how you get things done. There's the letter of the law, and then there's the spirit of the law. The letter of law, at least how I see it, is very legalistic. It's my way or the highway. Here's the rules, follow them, or find someplace else to go. Versus what I'm sensing from you is the spirit of the law. You have a framework, you have an approach, you have a strategy, you have a vision, and you use the word vague, but I'm sort of feeling this word spirit, the spirit of the law. And then that just creates a place where people can bring their own unique approach. They can bring their own ideas. They can think a little bit differently, all within the context of the spirit of the law, where it provides that framework, but gives them lots of flexibility to be able to make it their own. I'm kind of making that up on the fly. It just resonates. I'm wondering, does that feel like what's happening in your world?
Yeah, I'm sitting here smiling, Jeff, because you really hit the nail on the head there. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking there is that really, I have to give kudos to AstraZeneca for giving me the opportunities that they did over, nearly a 30-year career with them. And one of the strange things about my AstraZeneca career is that I worked on 6 drug projects in my career. The unique thing about those 6 drug projects is that none of them were homegrown AstraZeneca drugs. They were all drugs that were either licensed in from other companies or partnered with other companies. That's a very common thing nowadays, but 20 years ago, that was not common. So my portfolio of drugs that I've worked on is rather unusual. And because of that, and big companies need rules and regulations. They need infrastructure. It's the only way that they can function. I had the opportunity, however, of working in a massive drug development company, but being able to adapt those rules, because none of the projects that I was working on were conventional projects. They had other people, other companies involved in them, which gave me the opportunity then to flex the principle that you talked about and actually do what I thought was the right thing for that project. And I was always viewed as the project leader who kind of did things differently. But I was in the fortunate position where that was legitimized because I was working on a different project. So I could legitimately say, well, we're not going to follow that particular governance procedure because it's not relevant for this project that we're working on. people couldn't argue with that, which then allowed me to, as you said, work to the spirit rather than the actual rule. And that, I think has helped me tremendously through my career, and it's made it, frankly, more interesting because I get to kind of do what I want to do, but still within the broad guardrails, and that makes it more fun.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome to take that concept and run with it if you want to use that language.
Yeah, really well, actually.
I don't hold it. I don't hold any proprietariness to that. You talked about your career journey, and I noticed something this morning as I was preparing for our conversation. At Aristea, you're working on inflammatory disease. And 40 years ago, your doctoral dissertation was on a particular type of inflammation as well. And I just found that so interesting, these bookends of the beginning and where, not that you're at the end, but where you are today is so similar, is similar. And I'm wondering, how is that, how do you see that journey from where you started at university to where you are today, working on not the exact same thing because technology and everything changes, developments happen, but inflammation. I found that very interesting.
I guess there's I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it, before we got onto the call today. And I guess I have kind of two responses for that. One is that I think inflammation is an area that, from a clinical research medical perspective, is still pretty well untapped. So there's a lot still to be unpacked there. And, that I think is probably why, I'm back in the inflammation field again. So I think, inflammation runs across a whole host of different disease states. And there's a lot for us still to understand, and a lot of unmet medical needs still to be addressed. I think the second thing I would say, however, and this is probably a learning for any young scientists or leaders that are listening, is it kind of happened by chance. And it wasn't planned out that way. And I've always developed my career. I've never been one of these people. I always remember when I first joined ICI, as it was then before AstraZeneca, you used to have to lay out your 5-year plan for HR. I used to hate that. And for me, it's probably one of the worst things that you can do for your career, because I think what it does is it narrows your thinking and puts you on a solid track to get to a particular job that you want, and actually means that you may well ignore opportunities that come along. And all through my career, I've never really planned out my career. And as opportunities have come along, I've always evaluated, is this something that's going to challenge me? Am I going to learn from it and develop as a leader? And am I going to be able to add some value? And if I could tick all three of those boxes, I would just say yes to the opportunity and take it and not know where I was, going to go. And that, for me, through my career, has just opened up new career paths that I never even imagined were there. So, 40 years ago, when I was studying inflammatory bowel disease for my doctorate, I had no concept whatsoever that, I would be a founder and CEO of an inflammation-based biotech halfway around the world in San Diego. And had I planned that out, I probably wouldn't have achieved it, is my guess. But take it step by step, take the opportunities whenever they arise, and I think whatever you'll do good things as you go along the way.
Yeah. that's sage advice for those that are listening, wherever they are in their career. And I'm wondering if you could stay in the sage mode, James, and go back. You can go back however long you want, maybe before you were a CEO and founder. If you could go back to a younger version of yourself and give some advice, have a conversation with him, pull him aside, what would you say to him today, to that younger version of you?
Simple. Do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, it may be painful at the time, may be painful to you, it may be painful to your team or your company, but ultimately it'll make you a better person. And first of all, you'll have done the right thing, which can never be bad. And you'll find a way through that, even though it's tough. And again, I remember, I guess, a pivotal moment in my career when I was pretty early on in my drug development career, and AstraZeneca had just had a drug approved. And as it was being used, by patients, a particular liver side effect started to emerge that was not observed in the clinical trials. And I always remember the chief medical officer of AstraZeneca at the time was a gentleman called Howard Hutchinson that I, to this day, have massive respect for as a drug developer. And I remembered watching him deal with that emerging information and personally make the decision that we had to remove that drug from the market because the benefit risk profile was no longer acceptable with this emerging side effect that was seen. And this was a potential huge blockbuster drug for AstraZeneca. So removing it from the market was a massive impact on the financial status of the company. But he taught me in that moment to do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. And that stuck with me through the rest of my career. And if you continue to have that lens of doing the right thing, then you'll succeed because people will recognize that, and you'll work your way through the tough times that are created by doing the right thing. So that's what I would recommend. And I'd also probably say, and we already touched on it, don't plan too far ahead in your career. Keep your options open and grab opportunities that seem exciting at the time, and just go with it. And it'll take you. You won't know where it's going to take you, but it'll take you to somewhere good.
Wow. Well, wonderful advice to yourself from 30 years ago, but also to anybody who's listening. James, this has really been a joy. I've loved diving into your story and to how you see the world and leadership. Thank you so much. If folks want to know more about you, connect with you, where can they find you? How can they do that?
Yeah, so you can get me on LinkedIn. Just search for James Mackay, and I'll pop up pretty close to the top, given my activity on LinkedIn. You can find out more about our company at AristeaTX.com. That's AristeaTX.com. So yeah, I'm happy to connect with anybody that has listened to the podcast and might want to discuss some of these topics further.
Yeah, and we'll put all that in the show notes. James, thanks again. I really appreciate your heart.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure talking to you. So thanks for having me on.